Hello everyone, Ron again, and in this video I'm outside. But when I go back inside, I'm going to talk about how I chose the instruments and the way that I created the thing from the last video, like the melody. Action.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And I think it's about to rain, and you know, the mosquitoes out here are crazy. The mosquitoes are what really make finding a space hard, because you set up a camera and they're trying to bite you while you're doing it, and that's annoying. So like, I was just thinking to myself, you know, if you've seen the Fairly Odd Parents, I don't know how it was not a wish that mosquitoes didn't exist. Like, that would have made a banging episode for the Fairly Odd Parents, you know what I'm saying? Because if it was me, I would have made that wish. I don't get it, you know? Like, they didn't think about that. They dropped the ball while it was on the air. If there's ever another show where a 10-year-old kid is wishing about stuff, then they probably gonna have to include that wish, you know, because that's what I would wish for. But yeah, in this video, I'm gonna explain how I picked the instruments. I'm gonna explain the reasons why I chose the melodies I did while I was writing it for the other video. And I'm gonna explain some of the choices I made just in all of that. And I might even start to explain how I mixed it, you know, and what I did to like the bus, but we will see. And so with that being said, see you inside. And if you watch this video, make sure you comment about how you like this idea. You know, me being in front of the camera was something that was requested, rather than just showing the dog. I guess there's a whole human feature to this thing where people want to see you, you know. And it's funny when I watch it back, because I look around and look all over the place, and like, you know, you look up when you're thinking about what to say. Yeah, the car is about to pass. Yup. This is gonna be fun to edit. Alright, on to the video. Alright, so we're in FL Studio, and we're gonna be discussing how I chose the instruments I chose. So first of all, I want to say that it may not be as strategic as it sounds, how I picked the instruments actually, but it was more tactical. Like, the difference, in case you don't know, a strategy is long term, tactics are quick, and they change sporadically, while the strategy does not. So the strategy occurred when I was laying down this beat. And the strategy there was that these notes are out of the way of these notes, and this was the main melody or rhythm that I had laid down when I was first starting to create this beat. This was secondary and syncopated so that they would sort of play off of each other. And I was talking about that in the other video, where they're like brother and sister or husband and wife, you know, and then you have this right here that's like a brother-in-law, and it sort of stays out of the way of them all. But let's say it's a mediator and it fills in these gaps where there's not as much, because obviously these two are doing a lot throughout the majority of the measure. We talked about this like it was a stern grandfather, and it was very stagnant, stuck in its ways sort of, and it was rigid in its affairs. And this up here was like a child because it was more free, or at least that's how I intended it to sound. So with that understanding being in place, the first thing to think about is that you choose instruments that fit. So this video is about how you pick instruments, as well as sort of how you write melodies, because there are a lot of instruments that sound great, but you want to keep them in the range that they're comfortable of playing. Like how a singer does not sing out of their range or they sound really bad. If this was played on a cello, if it were stretched, because you could stretch it so that the program will produce the pitch all the way up there, but it's going to sound bad. So you pick something that already plays in that range because that's where it's comfortable. So with that idea in mind, that's how I selected the instruments. The next thing is that you're going to test them to make sure that what you believe is going to sound good actually does sound good. So because I wanted to do less work and I didn't feel like splitting these all up, cutting them and pasting them in different patterns, I use Contact because it has multiple inputs or multi-channels, you know? So I could just change the color of these notes and add multiple instruments, and Contact will respond based on what color is being played. So I started off with the first melody, the one that I originally wrote while creating this. And I said, well, that was this one. So what instrument is going to have that one? What do I want that instrument to sound like? What type of song is this? And I decided that it was sort of tropical and maybe a bit tribal. So I would go that way with it because I wanted to sound relaxed but still catchy. So I got to pan drums and I was like, I don't use pan drums that much. And I was like, should I use it? So I added it to Contact and I changed the highlight pattern so it was green, which is the first color. And I just listened to how it sounded because I don't have to be so strategic about how I pick instruments. Now I arrived at the point where I'm just listening to them. And that's the beauty of having a melody and writing it first on something generic like a piano. So I use the synthesizer and I'm like, it sounds good in the synthesizer, so it'll sound good somewhere else. That was the idea, right? Not just listen to pan drums. I wanted a relaxed feeling for this beat and just listen to how it sounds. Now keep in mind that I'm writing a melody and it's a percussion instrument, but it's one that changes pitch, which shows that things that are melodic are not the only things that can create a melody, because you can tune a percussion instrument to play various pitches, which is what they've done here. And that's awesome. So we arrived at this point. Next, I said, what is going to be the thing that sort of like sticks with this beat and that's going to play off of it? And I was like, maybe I'll try a horn sound. So then I went to session horns because I was thinking about this as something I would have to screen record later so it doesn't take up so much CPU to use session horns rather than session horns Pro. Session horns Pro is better and it does more stuff, but I didn't need all that. That's how I was looking at it. So then I switched the color and I said, all right, how does this one sound? Because I played around with it at first and it wasn't staccato like it is now. So I played around with it and I listened to how it sounded. And it wasn't staccato at first. Take note, it has articulations. It defaults to sustain. But I didn't want to use that for this particular piece. So I was like, when I play this, I was like, that sounds good, but it's not what I want. So I switched it, staccato. And I said, yeah, that's it. So then I said, I'm going to pick instruments in the order that I wrote these. And I was like, let me focus on this one. I changed the color. And then I added another instrument to Contact. And I was like, because those horns have so much power and they really give the feeling combined with pan drums that I want, this instrument will be more subtle. So, Tingklik. Gives me the idea where I could probably make something where it's just background music that you could even read to. So then I said, all right, this beat is important, or the melody that's playing is important, but it's able to switch pitch too, And because it's a different timbre, it's not going to interfere with the other ones that are like sort of predominant in the mix, because you're always going to have instruments that are the focal points and then the other ones that are supporting layers. So Tingklik supports, just like my metaphor about it being like a brother-in-law or an uncle or something, it supports those other two instruments that are here and here. It's playing this, but it supports the other two. It's not trying to overpower them because it's not a focal point. So then I had this. So then I was like, what do I add for the bass? Because that's what I wrote forth. I added a tube drum. Now at first I added a thunder drum, but I didn't like the way it sounded. The tube drum, it's got a different feeling when I played it on this note. And it just sounded better to me. The other one was like overpowering everything else and it was crazy. So then this is simple because it's just quarter notes. It almost sounds like a synthesizer. It looks like one too if you look at it on an EQ. It really does. And I was like, we have one last instrument, and what better to use than violas or violins, because those are like epic, you know. The only way you could sound better in a high range potentially, to me, that comes to mind instantly, is a flute. But I was like, I'm not adding a flute. So I was like, I'm just going to put a violin. I'm not going to put a viola because the range for violas is lower. You know, I think of them when I think of stuff that's like in this area, but that's already covered. And I think of cellos like maybe from here to here, and then basses, they probably start like lower. Usually when I'm writing, that's the way I think. And I adjust accordingly if I'm picking the instruments first and then writing the music, but this time I did it the other way around. So then it was violins, and you know, so I added it all together, and I was like, all right, now let's see how that sounds. And I started mixing stuff because I said I like all the individual elements, and then unmute everything. And after that point, I had this. Now, not directly after that point did I have this. There was still a bunch of mixing involved, and you can see I made a bus. All of them are feeding into this. This bus has stuff on it. There's like ozone 9 elements, there's overdrive, EQ, and a limiter. So I did more to it than that to try to even out the levels and to emphasize the instruments more and make them sound like they're together. The overdrive is adding saturation, and ozone 9 elements puts a limiter on it as like a final touch and turns it down so it's not too loud for the video, because I don't want it to clip when it goes to YouTube. But keeping all those things in mind, that's how I made the instrumental selection, you know, because I had already done the groundwork by writing the melody first. And so this combines with the previous video to tell you why, if you have an idea for a melody, you can just put it somewhere and then save it for later. Because in this event, I was able to go back to what I had done before, and now I can construct upon it and talk about how when you combine the elements of rhythm and syncopation and combine those with melody and the understanding of the chord theory, this is what you can achieve, because all of these notes are on the C major scale. So I wasn't going to pick notes that were going to sound dissonant relative to the note C. And if I did, like, you have a major second from C to D, and that could sound kind of dissonant depending on what else is there. They're not playing at the same time. See, this is playing D, this is playing D, and this one is out of their way. The bass instrument is just playing C, and so all of these melodies are mainly on C. And C is the root of the scale. So because they're like that, they sort of are just consonant with each other, and they're not really fighting. And the way they're mixed, the two that are predominant are the horns and pan drums. Those are the two that are most important. Tingklik is on the sides. The bass is in the middle because it's bass. And the violin is pushed back a little bit because it's a higher pitch. And so that's what I have for this video. You know, I'll probably continue diving more into this and maybe show some mixing techniques that I used while I was writing it, or while I was mixing it, or even while I was messing with the mix bus, because that's sort of like the idea of mastering in a way. And those will be for future videos because there's a good opportunity. And if I do that, then I will explore Kontakt. And you'll see why, for example, there's no reverb bus, right? Because you can see they only go to this. You're probably wondering, well, where is the reverb? How do they sound like they're in the same space if there's no reverb bus? And you'll see the answer to that if I go into that. But if you made it this far into the video, then I thank you for watching. I hope that you gained something from this and you were blessed. And as usual, have an awesome day. Peace.